within this year, you're going to eventually hit your wall. A lot of people might be too attached to who they were. If you do the same thing every single year, if you tell yourself that this is going to be your year and you're going to do the same exact thing to try and make it your year, you're going to get the same result. Happy New Year, everybody. It's officially 2023. I'm Ryan Zeller, and this is the Behind the Frames podcast where I talk about all things photography, filmmaking, and overall just content creation. I figured what better way to kick off the new year than to talk about a lot of the things that I did in 2022 to kind of meet my goals and what I plan on doing for 2023 to do the same. So without further ado, this is Behind the Frames, episode number 3. Let's get it. So before I really get into the point of this episode, I think it's important that we kind of set things straight so we have a little bit of a foundation. The first thing I want to talk about is New Year's Eve. It's a very exciting time. It's a very motivating time for a lot of people. It's a time to look back and it's a time to look forward. And people typically hit the new year off extremely motivated, which is great. It's awesome. But it always typically ends. It never lasts. I mean, if you go to the gym, you can see it at the gym. There's people that you've never seen before. And typically after the first, second week, they start dropping like flies. And I think the point around this episode is to avoid that. I don't want this episode to be all about, staying motivated, because I don't think motivation is a reliable source to help you meet your goals. So just wanted to get that out of the way. I feel like a big problem when it comes to people meeting their goals is I think a lot of people might be too attached to who they were, and they're having a hard time letting go, whether they like it or not. It's a comfortable thing. You don't want to be uncomfortable and step away from that person that you were. But the reality is, as the quote goes, if you want something you've never had, you're going to have to do something you've never done. If you do the same thing every single year, if you tell yourself that this is going to be your year and you're going to do the same exact thing to try and make it your year, you're going to get the same result over and over and over again. They say progress starts when you're tired of your own shit. And this is one of those times. It's up to you, really. So what can we do to kind of avoid that mess? One of the things that I did, and it might seem extremely basic, is writing your goals down. Don't put them in your notes. Don't put them somewhere in an app or anything. Put them somewhere where you will see them. Put them on a whiteboard. Put them on your bathroom mirror, on your wall, anywhere where you can be reminded of the goals that you set for yourself, because there is a powerful thing there. Like if you're not on track, if you're kind of falling off the wagon, to actually see those goals that you set for yourself at a time when you were so motivated, it's a powerful thing, because you realize that, you're not doing what you should be doing, and it causes us to be a little bit more hard on ourselves, which in small doses I feel is a good thing. You have to have that tough love with yourself. You have to have that tough conversation of like, hey, you're screwing up. And if you don't change it right now, you're going to hit next New Year's Eve and you're going to be feeling the exact same way you did this New Year's Eve. So what are you going to do differently to actually make the year count? So write down your goals, and also along with that, get super specific with your goals. If you want to make a certain amount of money, how much money do you want to make? If you want to make a certain amount, if you want to get YouTube subscribers, how many subscribers do you want? Put a number on it so that you kind of have an idea of like what you're aiming for, and you can start to put a plan in place. You don't want to just put goals out there just willy-nilly. You do want to create almost like a business model around your goal. And the next thing going along with that is to visualize. I think this is a super powerful thing. This is something that I've kind of learned about probably this past year, is really visualizing what life would be like if you actually achieved what you wanted to achieve. At the end of this year, New Year's Eve of 2023, what would it feel like if you actually made it? What would you feel like? What would you feel like throughout that year knowing that you're killing it? What would your life be like? What would you feel like walking into a room of strangers? How would your confidence change? If you said you wanted to lose weight and you were on the path of actually doing that, how would you feel? Really diving deep into that and like trying to visualize exactly what life would be like when that goal was met, I feel like is super key. One of my favorite motivational speeches is from Arnold, where he's talking about how he was a bodybuilder and he wanted to become an actor, and he was getting ready for a role, to try out for a role, and the director basically told him, hey, like, we want you for this role, but you got to lose weight. We need a lean athlete to play this role. And from there on out, he started to visualize himself as a lean athlete, what he would look like. And then he started working out that way. He started running, going on a couple mile runs every day. He was really visualizing what that end product would look like. And that's how he was able to achieve that goal. He stepped on the scale and he was at the exact weight that the director wanted, and he got the role. Arnold might not be Arnold if that didn't happen, which leads me to my next point. Don't underestimate the power of your why. Why do you have the goals that you have? Why do you want to do what you want to do? Within this year, you're going to eventually hit your wall. You can't rely on motivation alone, because motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes. So when things get really hard, that's when you have to really dig deep, and that's when your why is going to become extremely important. The less surface level your why is, the better. The deeper, the more meaningful your why is, the better. So really take time and sit down and discover what that thing is for you. That will make a huge difference on whether or not you'll accomplish your goals in 2023. And then on to the next point, the act of doing is important, which actually leads me to this book, one of my favorite books, and I'll actually add this in here. Read more books. Read more books in 2023. Don't use Audible. Read more books. I promise you it's going to make your life a lot better. This book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I read this book almost every single year just to remind myself of things whenever I'm slipping off the rails. There's a part in here that I absolutely love, and the part in this book is called the Do Something Principle, and I'll read just a portion of this just so you get the gist. Most of us commit to action only if we feel a certain level of motivation, and we feel motivation only when we feel enough emotional inspiration. We assume that these steps occur in a sort of chain reaction like this: emotional inspiration, motivation, and then desirable action. If you want to accomplish something but don't feel motivated or inspired, then you assume you're screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not until a major emotional life event occurs that you can generate enough motivation to actually get off the couch and do something. The thing about motivation is that it's not only a 3-part chain, but an endless loop. Inspiration, motivation, action, inspiration, motivation, action, etc. Your actions create further emotional reactions and inspirations and move on to motivate your future actions. Taking advantage of this knowledge, we can actually reorient our mindset in the following way: action to inspiration to motivation. I think this is super relevant to artists because as creators, we get stuck in that analysis paralysis because we're afraid of failure. We don't want to hit the wall because we feel like that is the end. Sometimes it's the failure that leads to the idea. And the last thing I'll leave off this podcast episode with is willpower is not enough. Whether you like it or not, willpower is exactly like inspiration and motivation. It's energy that eventually gets expended, and you can't rely on it. I think the only exception is if you're David Goggins. And willpower includes everything. It includes mental toughness. You know, I think we live in a world today where it's like that is the key to meeting your goals. Mental toughness is the key to meeting your goals. Anything that eventually gets spent needs to be replaced with something else. You're not always going to be able to grab from your willpower or your mental toughness to get you through the tough times. That's why I think it's important that we look at these things as tools rather than the end-all be-all, this is the solution to everything. Everything I mentioned above should be a tool in your toolkit. Inspiration, motivation, visualization. What is your why? Write your goals down on paper. Willpower, mental toughness. Those are all tools in your toolkit. They're weapons in your arsenal that you pull from when things get hard. Not one of them should be relied on 100%. They all work together. When one doesn't work, you pull to the next. When the other doesn't work, you pull to the next. And also, don't be so hard on yourself if you're not the most mentally tough person to be able to get you through things. And honestly, I love hustle culture. I mean, it gets me motivated. I love that stuff. But the reality is if the only way you're doing that is based off of like your mental capacity to be able to handle it, eventually you're going to hit that wall. And I say this with experience. I know a lot of very strong-willed people. I would consider myself to be one of them. Every single time and time again, it might be 6 months, 7 months, it might be even longer, but eventually you hit that wall. And anything that allows you to hit the wall cannot be relied on 100%. You can always build it up. You can always make it stronger. It will eventually get fatigued. So with all of that being said, I hope this was helpful to all of you. You know, I think it's important to really have aspects of all of these key points that I mentioned in your arsenal to be able to help you meet your goals. But also, I think it's important to have some perspective. Make sure you're actively looking at who you were and who you are now. Make sure you're proud of yourself. I think it's extremely important in anyone's journey to look at the small wins. I think life is a series of mountains, and the mountains never really end. And every single one that you summit, I think it's extremely important to make sure you're checking yourself and realizing that, hey, I was once down there and I'm up here now. And be proud of yourself. And then move on to the next one. As the famous Ferris Bueller once said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. If you found this podcast valuable at all, if you enjoyed it, please show some love. If you know anybody that might be able to find this valuable, share it with them. And also, if you're viewing this podcast on YouTube, or if you have a YouTube account, I would really appreciate it if you followed the podcast on YouTube, if you hit the subscribe button, like the podcast. And it's going to be a big year. I've already got guests lined up, guests on the schedule. It's going to be pretty cool, and I'm really pumped for it. I hope everybody crushes their 2023, and don't leave anything undone. Give it 100%. Close every loop, and make sure you make it to New Year's Eve of 2023 proud.